Um, it is a great pleasure to welcome to the stage Sarah Mins, head of Umbra Select, Umbra International Group. Of course, Simeon Rosette, CEO Rosette Bespoke Butler School, Monica Duperon Rodriguez as herself. We've got Mary Gamble, Executive Vice President, General Counsel, MPAC USA, and also Gamble Legal. And of course, David Hurd, Group Head of Security at Unilever. It's a pleasure to have you all here. What a big topic. What a big topic. And for the first time, we are combining the family office with the executive office of perhaps corporates. So let me start off with you, Monica, and then let's work our way around. Bear in mind, this is the very first panel. Can you give us a flavor of how you think this executive office, whatever it may be, sort of has changed over the last 14 months?
Well, it's changed significantly, specifically because of the pandemic and some of the mandates. At least here in the United States, it's been very complicated to keep up with all of the evolving mandates, lack of mandates, and then also the ever-changing direction of the CDC as well. So the office has changed in the sense that we're seeing that a lot of people don't want to come into the office. The other thing is we have a younger generation that is just itching to come back to the office, but they're also trying to be cautious because they don't want to be wearing the masks. Some of them don't want to get vaccinated. And some of the mandates, for example, here in Santa Clara County, right now, the mandates are that we provide, the office provides the county with the vaccination records, and that's been something that's a lot of people don't want that. So it's been very complicated. I think it's going to be very fluid going forward. It's going to be evolving. We are starting to see a lot of opening up here in California. But we still have a lot to see here. We're not quite as open as, let's say, Florida. So our offices are changing and they look different depending on where you are in the country.
Okay, well, that's good. And of course, that is why we have colleagues from across Europe and the States and beyond, on this event. Let's pivot to Simeon, because I think this is a nice counterweight. Obviously, we've got family offices, ultra high net worth family offices, but also corporations. Why do you think it's important to have this type of grouping on an event such as this?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to remember that all of these groupings are actually intrinsically linked, because the sort of clients you look after in a private family office are exactly the same people as populate the boards of large blue chip companies. So we're actually talking about, for a start, we're talking about the same people that we're looking after, just in different situations. And we're also talking about a similar structure. We're talking about similar expectations and similar challenges as well. So we can share the information that we have in these, sorry, let's just start doing something outside. So we can share the information that we have in these different situations to better progress that.
Exactly, and that's sort of the objective of today. Sarah, welcome. Obviously, protection for the family office and your world is different still. Or maybe I'm just assuming too much. Has the last 14 months changed things, or will we just go back to normal?
Yes, I think it has changed things. I think that there's we can see sort of a shift between both like the family offices and executive offices, and actually a need for sort of security personnel that can transition into any of those spaces. So we have a recruitment side of the business, and what we have been seeing during the last 14 months is that actually there has been a need for certain organisations or family offices to want people who come from a security background to maybe take on a role that isn't necessarily your close protection role. So we were recruiting people who have had a military background, for example, suddenly going in and becoming a very or also with that sort of background then going in as PAs or EAs into organisations. So I think what's really interesting for me that seems to have happened is that you know, a lot of the roles have shrunk over this time as, you know, people have been furloughed or people have left, and it's about keeping people that you trust really close to you. So a lot, you know, the people with these security backgrounds, you know, okay, they come with that, and we can, you know, through our recruitment process, we can vet them really heavily, and they can bring a lot to the table. So it's about sort of upping the training in-house rather than maybe getting in freelancers. It's about finding someone that you trust, that might be someone from a security background, and then training them up and allowing them to do other things with their time. So yeah, it's been really interesting. I think things have really become smaller in a lot of offices, but in many ways that has allowed offices to function much more smoothly across the board.
And it would give people hope that they could develop as well, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And again, for us as a business, we have developed over this time a training package for people to introduce them to sort of the security side, keeping their principals safe, and you know, talking about risk, obviously, you know, across the board, you know, allowing them to really look at risk from a cyber attack to how, you know, how you can keep somebody safe at the door of the office. So yeah, I mean, it's a wide-reaching thing, but yeah, it's a really interesting time. Going forward, I think it will keep people much more safe, and people will be way more aware of risk.
I like that. And then Mary, so let's run with that, Mary. Way more aware of risk, which is hopefully what we're trying to achieve today, right? Do you think that there will be more due diligence, more legal, you know, best practice put into place with these tighter knit teams?
I think so. And, you know, to echo the foundation that was laid before me, I think that we're seeing security integrated into the non-traditionally security roles, and everybody's just so much more cognizant of risk, whether that's washing your hands or the active shooter scenario. I think people are just much more aware of where potential risks lie and trying to integrate those best practices into daily operations. You know, I think we're also seeing, you know, as Monica mentioned, we're seeing a dynamic shift in what the workforce looks like and what they want. You know, the up and coming people are kind of, you know, the next generation, if you will, are setting this new normal standard of what they demand and what they want out of being in the office. And it's really coming, you know, as a mirror from the top down. You know, you've seen a lot of the higher executives, and like Simeon said, you know, those people are the same people, whether they're the, you know, the private high net worth people that you're dealing with in that capacity, or the senior management executive office. You know, the same group of people. And you saw a lot of the shift emerged when quarantines were introduced and some of these situations were unpredictable and unpleasant. People went, yeah, I'm not sitting in an uncomfortable studio apartment or small space in quarantine in New York City, or, you know, in the UK where I'm restricted. I'm going somewhere fun. I'm not sitting in the office anymore. Somebody else figure out how to make that work. And so you're seeing that trickle all the way down through a lot of companies where you're having these, you know, remote work locations much more accepted. And that completely shifts what we as security professionals have to integrate into our risk tolerance and how we prepare for that.
I like that. You mentioned risk tolerance. So actually, well, then that's a good segue. Let's go to you, David, with that. Mary says risk tolerance, David. Has that risk tolerance evolved? Because later today, we'll have a travel risk management panel, and don't want to kind of prejudice it, but we're kind of saying, well, people may or may not be traveling in different ways, but it might be the risk tolerance that we've got to address.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Pelham, the reality is that travel in our organization was banned over 15 months ago. So early on, It wasn't a restriction. It wasn't a nice to do if you could. It was a ban. So no one, only people that moved were assignees or expats that were going home. So we managing about 20 to 30 a week now. So what I saw is a sort of a shift in how we, operated. The typical, C-suite operation and executives and, office-based employees, I'm not talking about factories and supply chain now, was they would go to a country every week, just about. So we had, get on a plane, go to Colombia, go to Nigeria, go to Pakistan, go anywhere in the world. There always is a dynamic, and there's different areas of the business, whether it's food, whether it's refreshments, whatever. So when the ban was put in play, luckily, we had already done risk assessments and promoted that in all the countries of the world for home working. So we had quite a good sort of a template that we operated to. Most of our senior executives have multiple houses across the world, but a lot of them, we look at their primary house as the one that is near their normal workplace. So in London, would be in London, and they would work in, the London head office. So those are all assessed. Some of the items that we did pick up when we did these assessments over the last 15, 20 years is the travel stuff in the home. So, passports lying around, lack of a secure safe, lack of this, lack of that, maybe, they let the wrong people into the environment. Who are the kids playing with? Where do, people go to school? All this sort of stuff was discussed in detail, but it all came from a travel perspective. So all we did is we did that shift. We moved from, okay, you're not going to the office every day, you're staying at home. Remember the risk assessment we did all those years ago, or in the last 3 years, or whenever it was. Just use that mentality you are when you're at home. Now, going back to the executive environment, which we are coming back to in the UK now, and, in Americas, and I was speaking to my Israeli colleague yesterday, they're pretty much normal now. They're vaccinated down to, ages of 12 now, and 80% of the country's vaccinated. You go out for a restaurant, it's pretty normal. They still do social distancing. So in that kind of environment, we'll probably pick up in the next 6 months. However, we've retained, luckily in our organization, most of our members around the executive. So our chauffeurs are still in place, our executive hospitality team, our cleaners. And I think the idea is that when you build a culture of security, you build it around those kind of things. If you have that discussion at that stage around the office environment, you trust your chauffeur. The chauffeur's, confidentiality level goes probably higher than the CEO's colleagues in the organization, because he may tell them sensitive information that's far beyond what he would even tell sort of middle management. So that's very key for us. And ultimately, we promoted that in the home now to keep that going. And I'll just end on one point that I noticed. We've got quite a large footprint. We're in 190 countries, and we've got the same standards and security that operate in all countries, and the same risk assessment process, et cetera, and the same reporting process. So when we move from the office to the home, in all instances, my expectation was we're going to have more break-ins. We may have laptops or company assets being stolen from people that are at home, and the crime would go up and around that environment. The opposite was true. People all of a sudden realized how important their connection back to work was, and how they paid attention to security now. Because before, we had quite a number of laptops that were left lying around in cars, and iPhones and all these company assets that get stolen and they have to be reported. But now, being at home, even myself, I'm very precious about my kit that I've got at home, and I'll make sure it's secure, etc. And we've always promoted, in a home environment, some simple truths like, if you can have surveillance, don't need to have it, but if you're in a high risk area, put it in place. Make sure you have an alarming company connected to it, etc., etc. So all those years of work, which we didn't understand at the time because we just giving best practice, at the moment has really flourished in terms of people like, oh, I remember that guy talking about what we should do to secure our assets at home, how the home environment should be, and all those things. So our statistics, looking at across the board, because we measure everything, is actually lowered than it was pre office environment. And I think the fact is that people aren't moving from the home to the office, and there's quite a public criminal activity in those areas, and we've lowered that metrics for this year. So that's sort of the whole story in a nutshell.
Okay, well that's the whole gambit. You've given us lots of food for thought, because you've touched on many areas that hopefully we're going to flesh out today. You mentioned the driver and maybe protected mobility. We had a very nice event on protected mobility. I should have probably brought one of the drivers. That would have been good fun. Or, well, no, because they're not allowed to say anything. So anyway, Monica, what do you think then? You know, this is an opening panel. We're framing the debate of this executive office of the future. We're kind of just using sleight of hand between the ultra high net worth office and the corporate office. What other synergies do you see happening? Talking to wealth managers more, talking to actuarial scientists, talking to the cleaner? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, in the corporate world, talking to doctors who specialize in infectious diseases and ergonomics. So that's come up. Also, how to have basically communicate the information out to all of the employees, because everybody's remote. Also communicating with all of the employees on talking to employees and things that we've never talked to them before. For example, situational awareness and how to protect themselves, because now they're at home, they're not at the office, and you know we still need them. So we want them to be safe, and then also protecting themselves from the pandemic and disease. So the dynamic has changed significantly, and I think in executive protection, we're much more aware of the risk management factor and speaking with legal so that we don't say or do anything that could potentially put us individually or our clients in a bad position. So we're much more mindful, I think, in terms of how we communicate with other aspects of the organization. So yeah, legal's playing a huge part in this, and then of course our benefits division as well. So the conversations have definitely expanded to other divisions of the corporations, of the business, to be able to keep going. And also revisiting our continuity plan was extremely important, because we wanted to make sure that we had a good continuity plan in place, because that also was brought to light. I think we became more aware of the fact that we needed to maybe revisit that and modify it a little bit.
And I like that, because that continuity question, and we will have an entire corporate security panel which would ask this question: should we now give it back to other people? You know, or do we like having resilience and continuity? I don't know. It's a big question.
I think that's if we have that conversation, maybe in 6 months, we'll know more on how that's going to evolve. But I think right now what we're seeing is we're throwing it back at each division to make sure that they know what they're supposed to be doing and how to properly establish that continuity plan, and then having it as a whole globally for the company or for the office, depending on whether we're working with high net worth or, you know, in the office. But it's definitely a very important conversation to bring everybody into it, because again, we want everyone to be aware of the fact that we need it, and also how it works. That's going to be extremely important.
I like that. Well, let's use that awareness generating and ask Simeon, is this pandemic a catalyst that has made family offices take note of security because they are afraid, or is this a more permanent trend? Or am I using a wrong premise? Have they always taken it seriously?
Well, I think there's a few things there. Yes, of course, they've always taken it seriously, because you know, the sort of people that are family offices looking after are always, they're in the public eye. They're always at risk. It's something that's always been in the back of our minds. But having it spread out, like not being literally in a family office, not being literally within one property of belonging to the principal, that kind of thing, that I think has empowered everyone to take responsibility. Like when Monica was talking about situational awareness there, that's something that people are now looking after their own situational awareness. But before, they were purely reliant on the security team. You know, they would be purely reliant on sort of what people like David were putting in place for them to follow, and maybe not thinking about it for themselves. You know, and now what we're seeing is more of an appetite to understand the risk, more of an appetite to take personal responsibility and understand the risk. And some people are maybe misunderstanding that and thinking that's taking away from the role of the professionals. But of course it's not. What it's doing is adding to and helping, because, you know, when we're in one of these situations where previously you might have had one pair of eyes, metaphorically, looking after the group, now everyone's using their eyes to keep safe and keep, you know, how many times did we hear about people leaving laptops on the seat on the train and getting off the train with their laptop there? Or how many people had conversations on a mobile phone in public, not even considering the fact that other people could, of course, hear every single word they were saying, and things like this. We heard this all the time. And I think that being in our homes and being responsible for this ourselves has made us a lot more understanding of that and aware.
And that understanding perhaps is something that the security side has been trying to generate interest in. And maybe the wealth management side have said, leave me alone, I'm trying to make money. And now perhaps, I don't know, the gods are there. I don't, I'm making stuff up now, but Sarah, maybe paint a more accurate picture than what I've just done. What are the family offices now taking more seriously? What is the threat that they're actually addressing?
Yeah, I agree with Simeon. I think they've always taken it seriously, but I think I feel like this global pandemic has been a great leveler. And I feel that there are things that money cannot buy here. So I've been seeing a lot of our high net worth individuals and clients being far more vulnerable than I've ever seen them before. So that surely brings risk right in the front of their mind. Yeah, I think specifically what have they been looking for? Well, yeah, they're looking for better surveillance of their homes, potentially. They want to be surrounded by more trusted people, a bit that I touched on before. And again, in terms of being a leveler, you know, yes, high net worths, we were always worried before about their staff, and they were worried about their staff and can they be trusted? But now it's not just the high net worth clients, it's everyone. You know, if anyone's working from home and they have a cleaner that comes in on a Thursday, then suddenly we need to know, okay, the cleaner's background, how can that be trusted? So the security has, completely shifted from just, okay, let's have a really trusted close protection person, let's have really brilliant surveillance of our homes, but it now becomes about people, HR, and making sure that you're surrounded by the people that you can absolutely trust. And then obviously the rest of the things, you know, making sure that you know you're secure with all your cyber or your tech. And you know, luckily we know lots of people. It's about collaboration as well. I think, you know, you need to find the people that you can really trust here. And if it's a business that does your cyber security much better than the person that you've been sort of making do with for the last couple of years, like suddenly people want the best, especially if they can afford it. So yeah, and you know, to source that, then sometimes that means collaborating. So for example, if someone came to us and we couldn't do something as specific as someone needed, we would find the right person to do that. And I think we all have to admit at the moment, to keep people safe, you know, we just have to make sure that we are collaborating to do that.
And that's the who you're going to call kind of strategy, because if at least if you're honest, I don't know, but maybe this person does. And we'll get into vetting a bit later, because then how do we vet our previously trusted network? It's a good question. Mary, and then David, I'm conscious of time. So Mary, what do you think we should try and achieve with this event today? You know, let's say we finish this event. I know we just started, but let's say we finished. What should we try and tease out from it?
Question. You know, speaking primarily from the legal side and, you know, putting that hat on, I think a big takeaway is that there's been a fundamental shift in what it means for executive office risk management. You know, I've seen such a shift away from the traditional buckets of cyber and physical and, you know, things like that are the you know, the flashy items, and it's transitioned into other areas where we've had to take a closer look. I mean, things like immigration have been a big issue where people are, you know, I know that a lot of companies have banned, you know, David, like you said, banned travel, but private individuals have the means to travel and go somewhere a little bit more pleasant to ride out, you know, this pandemic. And I've seen issues with immigration where people go and then all of a sudden the borders close unexpectedly, or the airports close, or a visa expires. And then all of a sudden you've got, you know, a C-suite member of your team stuck in a country and they can't get out or they can't get home. So that presents a whole another pile of risk. Or Zoom calls, you know, we're so familiar with it now, but you know, how many times did we see, you know, flashy headlines where somebody wasn't wearing pants, or something was going on in the background, or somebody saw, you know, shared a screen and something untoward was on another tab. And so that's risk management, you know. So it's changing that perspective and broadening that scope of, you know, how do we truly manage the risk for our principal, for our organization, for an individual? You know, what does that look like? What is the whole spectrum of risk that we need to make sure that we're managing? You know, supply chains, you know, keeping an eye towards that, because if the supply chain falls and you're a manufacturer, then your business is toast. So it's truly broadening the scope of risk management outside of just purely maybe the physical or the cyber security, or the, you know, situational awareness of the in the moment security, and broadening that scope for risk management of where are all of our potential risks, where are our threats, where do they lie, and how do we manage that from a really holistic perspective.
Love it. And don't forget the man in court as a cat. That was a good
Right.
Yeah, that was a good.
Your Honor, I promise I'm not a cat.
Yeah. Well, I like that. And David, maybe a similar question to you. Obviously, it is not so usual to combine the ultra high net worth question with the executive and corporate question, but what can we hope to achieve at the end of today?
I thought you were going to ask me something else, like whether I was wearing my pants or would bring my cat in to just prove that I have a cat. But yeah, it's takeaways from this. I mean, this is the intro. So for me personally, I have been working in corporate security a number of years now. And when things go wrong in our world, you know, it's catastrophic at times and you could lose lives. And that is a good day when, you know, no one got injured. So we use that as a benchmark, and it's all relates back to assessing and compliance. All of a sudden, we are now thrust into a world where everything is medically compliant. You can't enter the building without doing a training or an app. You can't enter an eating space without having a mask on your face. You can't have a sanitize your hands or whatever before going shopping. So you've got all this compliance checks come in. Now, our opportunity, I believe, for corporate security is to keep that compliance going. So a lot of people looked at that with a flippant remark at times. Why should I do these checks? You know, why should I do my travel assessment? Why should I, lock my office door? Why should I shred the paper? All the stuff that we promote all the time. And now I think fundamentally the culture globally is more towards compliance. So what I'm trying to do in my little space is keep their compliance going. So where we put checks and balances and apps before people can do stuff, I want to keep that on the cards. I don't want to lose that. The medical may come back to normality, but I feel without being too dictatorial, it's good, these checks, because we get good data on how compliant people are and how safe they are. So if they know that they've done their digital app to say that they, did that check, and it all goes on one big database, and we can come back. If it goes wrong, at least we can refer back to all that data now and say, okay, well, the reason why this went right or wrong is because that wasn't done. Whereas before, I think, particularly in our organization, we've got this spirit of entrepreneurship and go out and make as much money as possible and just produce. I think the business has taken a little step back because it's life safety and medical, and said, okay, let's put all some checks and balances. So my job now is, and I hope people listening to the rest of the speakers would think about what we've achieved in the last sort of 16 months. What do you want to keep, and what do you want to, put in the archives and never look at it again because it was just a bad experience? So for me, I've kind of made a roadmap of what I want to keep, and I will be, trying to promote that going forward, because it's a case study of what is good compliance and what is not, really. So the takeaways will be, think about what you've done, think about where you are right now, and think about, what your future would look like. But for me, the key word is just keep the compliance up, whether it's in the home, and everyone's doing a good job there. I proved that with our stats. And then whether it's in the office, let's just keep the risk lower than it was prior. If we can get anything out of the pandemic, it will be that. Thanks, Philip.
Great. Well, great sentiments. And I know, admittedly, asking about takeaways at the very beginning is a bit unusual, but I feel it can set the tone for the whole event. So that's why I think it's a very important way to look at it. And I love those takeaways, David. But we are now out of time. This is but an introduction. And so I hope to keep this wonderful panel in the audience to heckle and ask questions and everything. So please give Monica, Mary, David, Simeon, and Sarah a big virtual round of applause. Fantastic. And we got nice comments in the audience. I'll put you back in the audience, and we'll see some of you very soon. There we go. Oh, yes, we got nice comments. Keep on coming through. Thanks, John. Thanks, Lee. Wonderful news. Okay. And I'll just put you back in the audience. Marvelous. And yes, I can see someone's put a link in, but I'm not sure. Anyway, if you do want to chat to everybody, please do click on all panelists and attendees. That way we can chat to each other. I'm going to click this wonderful button.